My name is Dustin Dixon, and I just recently moved to Fort Collins on June 1st, me and my wife Haley. I'll just tell you a little bit about how I grew up in the church. My family, with a town of 2,000 people, probably 10% of the people in the town were part of my family, and we all grew up in the church and lived a fairly good life. In comparison to most American families, it was a perfect life. Early in high school, say around 14, I dropped out of athletics, which I had been in athletics my whole life, and the kind of the thing in our town is if you don't play football, you are not anybody unless you're one of the party guys. So I turned into one of the party guys, I would say, and kind of got into drugs and alcohol at a young age, which shaped a lot of my opinions of people and the things that I do. Whenever we were in high school, I started taking drugs and smoking marijuana, and it didn't seem like a very big deal at the time because a lot of my friends were doing it. It's just part of high school in a small town. There's nothing to do. We go to a pasture and park cars and sit around and do nothing. So that's what ended up with the wrong type of people, and God really, at that point I was really ignoring what God wanted me to do with my life, and that kind of carried over into college. When I left for college, I had some of the good friends around me still at that point, but I was rebelling against them and rebelling against what they were trying to do with their lives, and it made me feel like I wasn't as good enough to be around them because of all the things that I was involved with didn't really no longer went with them because we didn't have the connectivity of a small town anymore. We were basically, I was going my path and they were going theirs, and that went on for two or three years where I started really getting into drugs and dealing drugs and basically treating all the women in my life, very bad. But at that time, I got caught in a situation where I was going to pick up some drugs that were in Houston at the time, and I was in College Station, which is probably about an hour and a half away. And it was funny because I was on the phone with my mom right before I left, and she told me, "Don't go to Houston, it's flooding." Well, a country boy from East Texas, when they say flood, I usually think, 2 feet, 3 feet of water. Well, I went down there and drove through about 3 feet of water getting down there. I don't know how my car even made it down there, but then when we get there, the flood rose to about 10 feet of water and completely submerged my car. And I was with the wrong people. We got stuck there for 3 days. And at the time we were on drugs and alcohol, and it really didn't matter. It was no big deal. But now looking back, it was a real turning point at that time in my life because it put me in that situation with those people and made me really look at what was going on, and it took away everything that I had because at the time I had a car and I was going to school in College Station, and at that time whenever the flood came I only had liability insurance on my car, so I went from living in College Station, going to school and doing pretty much whatever I wanted to do to no car and moving back home with my parents.
So you're doing a lot of drugs, you're dealing drugs, you're just totally living apart from Jesus. What is it that God begins to do in your life to draw you to Himself?
We were in a flood that submerged my car in 10 feet of water, and at that time I realized that God was trying to tell me something, that it's a time for you to start moving towards come back to Him a little bit and rein in what I had been doing for the past 4 or 5 years. So he showed me that with the flood, but at the age I was at and being caught up in that lifestyle, I totally ignored all the signs there. It was short-lived, maybe 1 or 2 months. I started going back to church heavily and trying to get my life right, but then it quickly fell back into the deep depression and the drug addiction that I had throughout high school and college. So I think the second time when God really called upon me is when my car got stolen in Irving, Texas when I was living there, and it was was a wake-up call because I was doing a lot of bad things and carrying drugs in my car, and it's interesting to me how God will put something in your life, and it's indirectly related to what you're actually doing, but in so many ways it's directly related. And each time when I felt like God came back in my life, He showed me directly what I was doing wrong and where I was going wrong. In this case, He stole my car because I was taking drugs around Texas, around East Texas and Dallas and area in my car. That happened, and then not even a year later, we were in the parking lot, and this was when me and Haley had gotten back together after we were together about 2 years after I came home to East Texas, and then we split up because she couldn't deal with the lifestyle I was living. I was living a lie all the time, and she kind of caught on to that. So she left for quite a while, and then we got back together later on after the robbery of my car. I started reaching out to her and trying to get back in to the church and to a Christian lifestyle, and then I quickly went back. It was up and down until we went through a robbery where someone got in the car with us and kidnapped us for 2 hours and took us to an ATM. And it was weird, though. I saw, the people say that you see things in your life. You see your family as these points in life when you think you're going to die. And I saw everyone in my family at that point, but I didn't see my brother. And that's when I knew that we weren't going to die that night. And I didn't see him, so I knew that this wasn't the end. So we made it through that night, and it really took a toll on me and her. For probably a year later, we couldn't even go outside at night, and it just stripped all of our emotional value to anyone. I mean, we were very angry at the world, angry at God at what we went through, and didn't understand what His reason was for bringing that. Now we look back, and that was a turning point, and definitely a turning point in my life. And it was probably a year of going back in and out of the lifestyle, and then finally it all clicked. I went through a deep depression after the robbery where I got on cocaine real bad, and that's the only time I'd ever really done cocaine. I had kept a job, and I had done good through school and everything else, and then I told myself never to do cocaine because I knew that would be the end of all those good things. And I got extremely addicted to that, and Haley brought my parents to my apartment one day and basically did a, like you see on TV, intervention, which totally awakened me to what I was doing to other people and what I was seeing in my life. And at that point, I told myself I had to stop.
So obviously, Dustin, God's done a huge work in your life, and He's shown His grace on your behalf, much like He did with Jonah, and how He pursued Jonah and He never gave up on Jonah. What would you say to people who feel like, I've done so many terrible things that there's no way that God's going to ever have anything to do with me?
I think that what you have to come to realize in that point is that you're not God, and the thing is that you're not responsible for anyone forgiving you for what you've done. It's already been forgiven. And once you realize that fact, you just have to remain patient and remain comfortable in your faith and remain diligent in what you're trying to do. And I think doors will open up faster than you will ever believe. It was just, I waited years for a change in my life, and it was a matter of months that everything changed, and we're here in Fort Collins and doing great. And I think that what I didn't understand for many years is that it's not up to you, it's not up to anyone. You just have to release all that burden off of your back and give it to God, and He will turn you around.